Gabba gabba, all you pinheads, and welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page and follow us on iTunes and Spotify. I'm Metal Dave, along with my co-host Jason McMaster.
Gabba gabba hey.
Gabba gabba hey. And if you didn't pick up on the clue during my intro segment here, we are talking today about the Ramones, but not just talking about the Ramones. We are joined by a special guest who was in the inner circle of the Ramones for 22 years. This guy drove the van. He made sure the band got paid. He was there for the ups, the downs, the craziness, the insanity, the dysfunction. The guy deserves a medal just for doing that, and he made it happen for 22 years, and he kept the Ramones on the road for 22 years. And Jason, as a touring musician yourself, I'm sure you can appreciate what a Herculean task it must be for one man to do that job with the same band for that many years.
Well, he also ran sound for the band in the early years, and actually, helped them in the studio. He helped the crew get to the gig. He helped not just the band get to the gig. He made sure everything happened.
Yeah.
And, the people that he's making sure they get, they do their job correctly. It's like, put it this way. The road crew, the drum tech, the guitar tech, whoever it is, even if it's just a bunch of buddies you take out on the road to drive the gear truck, well, they have to get there on time.
Yeah.
Right? He makes sure that that's happening. So here's another aspect too, is like all of those people helping the show happen at all, they almost need to know the material. Can you imagine the light guy doesn't know the songs? See what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
For an effective rock show, a good LD lighting director, they need to know the songs.
Yeah.
So Monte is like it's trickle down, Monte probably knows the songs as good as the band, as good as the drum tech should, as good as the guitar tech should. So to be able to say that we have Monte on Talk Louder podcast today is like, to me, it's like having Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols on Talk Louder.
It's
huge. That big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's that big of a deal.
Anyone who knows me knows I'm a huge Ramones fan, and it's an honor to have Monte Melnick on the show. And as you said, I mean, he not only did an amazing job for all those years, but he's also an author, and he's an accomplished musician in his own right. He was in some bands early on in his career, was signed to a record label. He had some stuff going on before the Ramones, and we'll talk about all that.
All due respect. So 22 years with the Ramones, and then he had this whole other life prior to the Ramones. So what year did the first Ramones get released?
76.
I rest my case. So we're talking like in 1965, 66, 67, 68, Monte was an accomplished musician and playing gigs in New York and had multiple bands. And we find out later that he was actually in a band with Tommy Ramone.
Yeah.
More than one band with Tommy Ramone.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We're going to pick his brain, learn all about him. Yeah.
It's very important day here on Talk Louder podcast.
Absolutely. I barely slept last night. I was like a kid staying awake waiting for Santa Claus, knowing that I was going to have Monte A. Melnick on the show today. And I couldn't be more excited. And with that, take it, Monte. 1, 2, 3, 4. And ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Monte Melnick, the Ramones tour manager for 22 years.
I like to use my middle initial, Monte A. Melnick.
Monte A. Melnick. Well, if you're going to use the middle initial, do you mind telling us what it stands for? What is the A?
9 letters. Can you guess? Nine letters.
I'm not good at math, not even all the way up to 9. I'm a Ramones fan. I can only count to 4.
I'll give you a hint. Go ahead.
I don't want to say Anthony.
I'm going to
I don't
say,
think that's 9. I don't think that's 9.
No.
I was going to
okay.
say Alexander.
There you got it.
Oh, wow. Good one.
Boom.
The
One for
wordsmith
Dave.
wins every time.
One for Dave. Well, I'm no good at math. In fact, I can only count to 4, just like the Ramones. But that was a lucky stab on my part.
Good one.
Monty.
Well, I also failed math too. So counting in math, counting letters, I would have failed that too.
Monty, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you. I'm a huge Ramones fan. Thanks for joining us today. I want to cover a lot of bases, but first of all, I want to talk about. I want to at least allude to your book, and I know this isn't the latest edition, and we'll get to the latest edition.
Right there.
There you go. He's got the latest
Oh,
edition.
that's cool.
The difference is the
You got to
Ramones.
make in the red.
You got to look for the red
And it says
Ramones.
bonus edition. Bonus edition.
There you go.
I added like 40 more pages to this edition.
And I wanted to ask, before we get to those 40 pages, in the intro to the book or close to the front of the book, you describe yourself, you sort of introduce yourself as Monte A. Melnick, a recovering Ramones tour manager, which I thought was great. And I wanted to know, after all these years, are you fully recovered, or do you still find yourself sort of twitching from time to time?
No, I twitch all the time.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
I don't think you can really recover from 20 years and over 2,200 shows with the Ramones.
Mm-hmm.
That is amazing. And I think it should be pointed out too that as a tour manager, most tour managers don't stick with one band for 22 years. They sort of go from band to tour, wherever the paycheck is. And you were exclusively the Ramones tour manager for 22 years. So how did you get to be that entwined in the group, so to speak, to where you weren't bouncing from band to band, tour to tour? You were with the Ramones the entire time.
Well, yeah, as you say, most tour managers, you do a tour and then it ends, and then they look for somebody else, or you have to look for another band or something. But I was lucky enough to work with the Ramones after the tours, doing videos and rehearsals, and work with the movie. And they needed me around for other things, besides the tour. So they kept me on.
Yeah.
So were you in the movie and the rehearsals and videos and things like that? Were you like a sort of a go-to for like production, or were you?
Yeah, I had to get the band to the movie or the band to the rehearsal, or make sure the crew got to the rehearsal to set up, and
Taking
other
care
things.
Of business.
I mean, they work so hard because after they did a tour, a couple of weeks tour, they come back and rehearse like for 2 weeks. So I had to be there, get the crew in there, make sure they got some of the band members in and out and stuff like that. And they went back on the road, and so they were basically a touring band. That's where they made their meat and potatoes. They really couldn't. They didn't sell them any albums in the beginning.
Right.
Right.
It took like 40 years to get that over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on that. We don't have to talk about it right now, but just the legacy and having you be there for, most of it. I can just say.
I say most of it. Yeah, I say
all of
pretty
it.
much. Well, yeah, I missed a few shows there and there, but from the beginning, I'm the only one alive now that was there from practically the beginning to the end.
Unbelievable.
Arturo would have been there, but he's gone, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Another one that passed away too soon, like the four original.
My older brother brought home, first Ramones record when I was very young, and he I have a mantra. He's, my oldest brother, Mitch, is one of my biggest influences because of, his older brother's record collection is a cliche now, right? So, but Beatles, Stones, Pistols, Ramones, and not necessarily in that order, but pretty close. And I remember it being a life-changing moment for me and my other brothers, just kind of around the house when that happened. My brother Mitch saw the Randy's Rodeo Ramones gig in San Antonio, and he has a picture of him and Joey, a black and white, glossy, that he has framed in his office. And I don't have a copy of it, and I should get him to scan that and send it. But it was taken at Randy's Rodeo. I think that he was in college there. Would have been 70s, you know. So, but my brother's wearing a leather jacket, and he has dark hair, and he's standing there. And they look like they look like chums. And I always was as a young, you know, freak out, I was, you know, thought that was the coolest thing. It's like, whoa, he's hanging out with the Ramones, when it was probably just a point and shoot click, you know, had to develop 110 camera or some shit. And so the Ramones have never not been in, well, I can throw a rock at friends and family, and if they don't have any history with the Ramones, they're fucking dead, you know. So
Nice, very nice.
yeah.
Don't kill too many people.
But
Yeah.
no. But I just wanted to say that, because, you know, you being there, you know, you're the fifth Ramone.
No, people say that all the time.
The sixth Ramone?
No. Marky's the fifth Ramone, and it goes
Okay,
Richie,
right.
CJ.
Right, 'cause of
CJ,
Tommy, right.
and Elvis is in there. There's 8 Ramones, actually. It's eight different Ramones. You want to make me 9 or 10, fine. I don't like to be the fifth, because Marky's actually the fifth Ramone.
You're right.
Actually,
You're right.
People tell me that all the time, but I like to correct them on that.
No, but you're exactly right, though, when you think about chronological and, you know, whoever showed up, right?
But I beg to differ, because with all due respect to Marky, CJ, Richie, and Clem,
Elvis, yeah.
and yeah, Elvis, Clem, you were there from day one till the last day in August of '96, and those guys can't claim that. They were on stage and performing, but you were there from the beginning. So I think that makes you the fifth Ramone.
Well,
But I'm not going to argue with you.
All right.
No.
So let's talk about this book, Monty.
Yes.
The first edition came out in I want to say 2004.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've updated it a few times, 2010 and another edition after that, because things kept on happening when I put the book out. You know, a lot of stuff happened during those years, so I kept on updating it. And finally got the last the bonus editions. Finally got a lot of stuff in that I didn't get into the original book there. You know?
So what type of information are you covering in the latest edition that wasn't covered previously?
Well, I talk about the managers like Gary Kerr first, a little bit more about Danny Fields, put a little bit more about Arturo in there, the backdrops, the T-shirts, the pinheads. Talk about the pinhead, and then I talk about each studio album, the 13 or 14 studio albums. I put a picture up, and I put a little stuff about who produced it and stuff like that. So it gives a little more information on little tidbits on the albums, you know.
Yeah. And that's out currently, correct?
Yes, on Amazon.com.
Yeah.
Worldwide.
I was honored to have a hand in the original edition. Frank Meyer reached out to me, and I helped transcribe some of the interviews, and he was nice enough to credit me in the book.
Great. All right, so you're in my book. Great.
Yeah. And you may not know this, but I'm sure this was standard stationery letterhead, but I got a thank you note from you.
Oh, really? What's it say?
It says something to the effect of thanks
What
for
did I
helping
say?
out. It says thanks for helping out with our book. We couldn't have done it without you. On behalf of Sanctuary Publishing,
Right.
we both thank you, Frank and Monty.
Frank's like the hardest working guy out there, man.
Yeah. So I wanted to know how it is that you hooked up with Frank, and how the two of you became a sort of co-authors of this book.
Good question. Yeah. Well, people were coming to me, do a book. I wasn't really ready to do a book, basically, until, Joey was around, so he passed away. I felt it was a time to do it. But so Joey had put out an album on Sanctuary Records, and they happened to have a publishing company at the time.
Right.
So a good friend of mine, Kevin Patrick, brought me in, and I sat down with the head of Sanctuary. I said, look, I'm not really a writer, So they said, don't worry, we'll get you a ghostwriter. So they picked up several people. I went through a bunch of different people, but Frank really stood out. He was a journalist, huge Ramones fan, a musician, knew everything about the Ramones, terrific guy. So I said, did a great job, Frank. You can be co-author of the book. Otherwise, it would have been just me and there'd been a ghostwriter. But he did such a great job, I decided to make him co-author of the book.
Yeah. And I know that was a real honor for him. He's done a lot of great things in his time, and
Still is.
yeah, it still is,
Guy
exactly.
doesn't stop. He's like a machine.
Yeah, you got that right. I can't even keep up with all his projects. So for people that don't know, we're having this show based on your time as the tour manager with the Ramones. But prior to that, you were friends with Tommy Ramone, the original drummer, before the Ramones existed. And because of that friendship, you guys were actually in bands together, and you were signed. You were signed to Reprise Records.
Yes, I had 2 albums on Reprise.
2 albums on Reprise.
Here's a little pic. This is me and Tommy, 1968.
Look at that.
Whoa.
I was in a band with him called Triad, 3-piece group.
Right. That photo.
Well, I wish I looked like that.
That photo's in this book.
What kind of style?
It was like a power trio like Cream.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
So I grew up with Tommy. I went to junior high school with Tommy. I went to high school with Tommy. I actually saw Tommy play in Forest Hills High School with the Tangerine Puppets. There's a picture of them in my book there, where John was playing bass at the time. And it was a talent show. I was up in the audience watching them play. I was good friends with Tommy, And then Tommy said, why don't you pick up the bass? And so I just picked up the bass. That was natural. And I was in several groups with him.
Yeah. And so you mentioned Triad and Triad. I'm sorry.
It's a power trio, kind of like Cream. We grew up here, and with the Fillmore East was around, so we saw a lot of great bands. And Cream, we saw the Cream, and I saw Jimi Hendrix at Hunter College, and the Fillmore East had so many different shows. It was amazing. It's like growing up with the music right there. Great venue.
Yeah. And then so then the Ramones are formed, and you kind of follow.
Yeah. Before that, I did. Before the Ramones, I was in a group called 30 Days Out, which is a country rock band. Tommy was almost in the band, but they didn't need an extra guitar player. But he was always into producing at the time because he just wanted to be a producer. So it didn't really bother him not being in the group. But we got signed to Warner Brother Reprise Records, and we had 2 albums out, 1971, 72. And we opened up for the Beach Boys and Tom Rush and Quicksilver Messenger Service.
Wow.
Stuff like that. And we almost made it. It's a country rock band. Got some good publicity. But after that, I came back and then was in another band with Tommy called Butch. Let me see if I can find a picture of that. That with Jeff Salin was in the group. Here it is. So Jeff Salin is up there. See, that's Jeff Salin, me, Tommy, Ramone. Now Jeff Salin, who he's from, what group he was in, right? Come on. Robert Montgomery was the lead singer, I think.
No, you got
Tough Darts.
Oh,
Remember the Tough Darts?
My punk rock
Montgomery guy, he was really good.
Yeah.
But at the time, after the 30 Days I came back, that was like glam was going out. As you can see, we were wearing like suspenders and silk pants and high boots and stuff like that. So glam rock was kind of phasing out. We were like the phase out of that. And then punk rock came in.
Yeah.
But we actually played Mercer Arts Center before it fell down. The day before Mercer Arts Center fell down, we played with Butch there. And a funny story about that, Johnny Ramone was at the show. So he came back, he said to me in front of Tommy, well, you were the best thing in that group. Right in front of Tommy, It's funny that he saw us,
So you're signed to a major label and you're having some success. And so at what point do you decide to switch gears and become, the sort of a behind the scenes tour manager versus an onstage performer?
Well, what happened was, it was a couple of years with 30 Days Out, and then the management wasn't great. We couldn't really get it together and go further. So the band broke up, that's what happens. Bands get together, they break up. So we broke up and I came back to New York. And my cousin Ivan was a locksmith. And he was putting in locks on this loft out on 20th Street, 23 East 20th Street. And the lady said, look, I got an empty loft here. I'm interested in opening up a rehearsal recording studio here. You know, anybody interested that can help me out and work building it? My cousin said, yeah, Monty. So I got in touch with her, and then I brought Tommy in with me. We actually designed the place, Performance Studios. It's a picture of that in my book here.
Yeah.
And so we designed the place, and we built it, hand built it as much as we could. Then we got time on our own. We got to manage the place. And then we got time for our own groups. I had other groups at the time I was working with, a different group at the time. And Tommy, at the time, he was working at the record plant. He just wanted to be an engineer and producer. So he brought the Ramones in there on his free time as a three-piece group.
Oh, wow.
And then they decided to do like showcases there. So I started running the sound for them. That's how I got involved with the Ramones. Of course, you know, at the time it was three-piece. Then Tommy said, you know, Dee Dee was having trouble singing and playing bass, and he heard that Joey had a great voice. He pulled Joey up the drum. Joey was on the drums at the time.
Right.
Pulls him up the drums, and they started looking for drummers, and they were so raw at that time. It's like I really, you know, my group, I had 3-part harmonies, and everybody played their instruments well. So seeing the Ramones back then, I didn't like them, seriously. But you know, I ran the sound for them at the showcase and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But nobody could understand what they were doing as far as drummers. So Tommy's a guitar player, actually. He's not a drummer. So he sat down on the drums. He's a great musician. Then he started play like this. Nobody could figure it out, so they joined the group. So he joined the group, and then they started doing showcases, as I said. And I started doing sound for them, and they started get a gig here, a gig there. And they said, well, come out and do the sound for us. And I started off doing the sound for them first.
Right. So you're part of the Ramones at this point, and 3 records. Tommy does 3 records, and then he leaves. And so, what kind of impact did his departure have on you? Because he was your buddy and sort of your invitation into the Ramones fold, and now he's gone. So,
well, yeah, you know, I understand. Tommy really, as I said, he didn't really want to be in it. He just wanted to produce them and manage them. Actually, at the time, you know.
Right.
So he was kind of happy to like step back, and of course Marky came in, and it was okay with me. And I mean, it was all right. You know, I'm working with Tommy, and then he started doing his own thing, and producing other bands. I think he did Replacements and other bands. He started producing and stuff like that. So he went off that direction, and I went off and doing everything for the Ramones. You know, as I said, I started doing everything. You know, basically the sound for them, and then I also was roadie for them in the beginning. That's how I learned my trade, really, from the bottom up. You know, schlepping equipment, setting it up, running the sound, driving.
Right. Settling up.
The bigger they got,
into the night, getting paid.
Well, no, that came out later when Danny Fields was still involved with that. There was about a year into me doing that. Danny, it was a funny story in I think Ohio, the Agora, one of the clubs. He was afraid. I'm afraid to go back and get the money because then we didn't draw a lot of people. He said, Monty, you go back, get the money. You can be the road manager. I went back and got the money, and I became road manager. He stepped back. So then I took over the role of doing, you know, everything at that time, you know, picking up the money, paying people and stuff like that. So I graduated up the ladder there.
You hear a lot of stories about, you know, tour manager or production manager going back to get paid, and, you know, the guy doling out the cash for the band sets a gun on the sets a gun on the desk before he pulls out the money bag. So how much did just to kind of spread fear? Anything crazy like that?
Well, luckily enough, you know, we got to get a good booking agent, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if they had any problem with the club owner or whatever, the promoter, I said, look, you're not going to get any jobs here anymore if you don't settle up with me properly. I never had any really big problems. So, a small minor problem. We were playing like Bremerton, Oregon, some lumberjack club or something. And, you know, I had like chicken wire in front of the stage. So they were like lumberjacks. They didn't know what the hell was going on. But at that time, it was like late 70s. They were playing like 30 minutes, you know, 30 songs. They were playing a lot of songs, you know.
Yeah.
But it was only like 30 so minutes. So we came off stage, and the club owner comes up to me, you go back on stage. You're not finished yet. So I put him back on stage. They played the same set over and again. You know? Twice. That was okay. They paid me after that.
So
I never had trouble.
So nice to play it twice.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
They didn't know the difference either, the people in the
No.
audience.
So when you start road managing the Ramones, one of the things I found interesting in the book is that um, the band would travel by van and the crew would travel by tour bus, which is it just sounds completely
Well,
opposite.
this is like later on. If you look at my book, there's pictures of tour buses. I have several tour buses. But the tour buses are very expensive, and you have to sleep in the tour bus to make it economically correct, you know. So they didn't like to sleep on the buses, neither did I. They wanted a hotel. To have a hotel and a tour bus was, you know, very expensive. So, I mean, we had tour buses. We had all sorts of different vehicles at the time. I mean, we started off in a van and with a trailer, you know, with everybody in the van. And we graduated up. We started with tour buses. And what we found out in the United States, it was better to just do like sections of the country. We do like, say, California. We go to California, do the West Coast. I had the crew drive the van out there, and then they would get a bus because they slept on the bus and they had to get, you know, they had to be there early and stay late. So they needed a bus at the time, you know.
Yeah.
But for us, it was like a couple of weeks West Coast up and down, and then we come back, take a week or two off, and do like the Midwest. So just for the States, we developed that later on in the Ramones career. I mean, in the early years, we did have buses and stuff like that.
Yeah. And, you know, the Ramones are kind of notorious for being dysfunctional. And I don't know if that's an understatement or an overstatement but from your perspective, as somebody who basically had to take care of them on a day-to-day basis for 22 years and on the road constantly, how would you characterize the personalities in the band? Like who was the most difficult to get out of bed and get on time, and who was, I mean, obviously Johnny was, you know, like clockwork, but I'm guessing that
So CJ.
and CJ later on. Yeah. Well, that's probably the Marines background, you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But tell us what's
to tell you the truth, I mean, most people are dysfunctional, period.
Yeah, true. but most people don't make their living herding cats, you know, and you kind of did. So
yeah, well,
not that,
Joey was the big problem because of his OCD, you know.
yeah,
And we didn't, in the early years, nobody knew what it was, you know. So Joey, what are you doing here? We thought he was like out of his mind until they really understood it was a condition, you know.
Yeah.
And he could take some medicine for it, but he had it pretty bad there. And that was the difficult part about, you know, getting him out of hotels and his house and stuff. What I would do is like, I tell him like the wrong time. I'd say it was like an hour difference, you know. He didn't realize, he didn't look at watches very much. So I said I gave him the wrong time most of the time to get him out. And it was difficult, you know, because a lot of times the band's downstairs and they say, what's going on? You know, let's go. And he's touching things and closing the door 10 times and stuff like that. That was difficult.
yeah.
And then, of course, Dee Dee was a problem with his drugs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Johnny was fine. No problem with Johnny. Marky was good. CJ, of course, is great. Richie's terrific.
Yeah. So speaking of those later day members, you know, I know it's not usually, I'm not saying that the road manager has any, you know, final say in the decision, but you were obviously closer as a tour manager than most tour managers would be. So were you privy to the auditions, and did you have any first impressions on these guys that ultimately joined the band, like Marky, CJ? Were you asked for your opinion at all? Or?
Basically, no, but I was there for like the CJ auditions. You know, he was the first one to audition out of like 20 people. Wow. You know, so I talked to them, they bring them in and stuff, look at them a bit, you know. But Johnny saw something in CJ right away, so it was nice. As far as Marky went, that was good because Marky would, the early days of CBGBs, basically, the only people in the audience was other bands. Yeah. So Marky was there all the time hanging out. He wanted to be in the group. So it was an easy transition for him to come into the band because they knew him and they was friends, and I knew him, and they didn't ask me, say, you like Marky. You know, he fit in very well. You know?
Yeah. So I'm gonna put you on the spot here for a couple questions. So what's the diciest situation you ever had when you were driving the band? Did you ever have any crashes or near misses or?
Thank goodness, no.
Wow.
That's amazing.
I mean, there's a few times we're driving in heavy, like blizzards, and that was pretty scary. Especially when in the early years I had the damn trailer behind. You drive a van with a trailer. It was pretty scary. I really didn't have any problem. Got stopped by a police a few times. I was driving too fast and stuff. One time I went through a light, and they actually, it's somewhere in Michigan. Took me down to the police station.
And they let you go, obviously.
Well, yeah. I mean, it wasn't a horrible thing going through a red light, making a turn. They just wanted to hassle us.
Yeah. What about while you're driving? Spats between band members.
No, they kept very quiet. They kept very quiet. The whole thing between with Johnny and Joey was really overblown. I mean,
that's
basically over. Yeah, I mean, they were friends from the beginning. They grew up. They were friends. They started the group. They did a couple albums together. And then the whole Linda thing came about, and then they decided not to socialize or talk to each other very much. But they had to talk to each other because they did the set list and the recording stuff in the recording studio stuff. So, but it was just like in the van, everybody had their own, like at that time, Johnny had a transistor radio with an earplug, and the Walkmans were coming in, and everybody's listening to their own thing. So it was very quiet in the van, basically.
Mm. Yeah.
They didn't want to fight, they didn't want to fight with each other because they figured it was better not to fight, just keep the band going, because when they realized the music was much more important than just fighting and, breaking up or something like that,
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are musicians, right?
Jason is.
Well, you know what it's like when you go on stage and the audience is feeding back to you. It's a high.
Yeah, that's right.
And I felt that because I was out there too on stage. Course. I felt that. That's why when a lot of bands come off stage, I want to keep that high going. They go drinking or drugs. I want to keep it going.
Right.
So Johnny and Joey realized that they had an incredible feedback. I mean, the audience is amazing for all those years. They go on stages like and they were producing records and stuff like that. So they decided just not to socialize, basically.
So my other on the spot question for you is, again, as someone who's on the inner circle of the Ramones, what's your favorite and least favorite Ramones album?
I like all the Ramones albums. I have a favorite Ramones song, though.
What is it?
It's from End of the Century, and it's called All the Way.
Uh-huh.
Any idea why I like that song?
Are you mentioned in that song?
Yes, I'm written into the song.
Yeah.
Monty's driving me crazy. It's like being in the Navy.
Yep.
Holy crap, how can that not be my favorite Ramones song?
Good one.
Were you driving them crazy?
Of course.
Was it really like
being in the Navy? Yeah. So according to Joey, it was. Also in that song, he talks about the van driving them crazy and the Monitor Men, or why are they still alive and stuff like that. Wow. You should listen to the lyrics of that song. It's very
great.
Interesting.
Yeah. Funny that same album has Danny Says on it, correct?
Yeah.
Which is Danny Fields.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another Life on the Road story that references one of the guys who keeps the machine rolling. So my favorite Ramones song, by the way, is Just Want to Have Something to Do. Love that song.
So in Rock and Roll High School, do you remember that part? What comes up when they play that song?
I just want to have something to do tonight. They're driving down the street in the car. They're coming in the
pink Cadillac.
Yeah. And you're the driver.
No. Rodney Bingenheim's the driver.
Oh, that's right.
But they pulled to the side. I come out. You look, and I come out in front of the camera, shake hands with the manager. They walk in front of me. And then right behind the whole song, I'm right behind them. You can see me for the whole song behind them. I'm playing like the promoter of the show. So I'm talking to the manager, pointing things out. And actually, that movie, the manager's carrying my silver halberd.
The suitcase.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So Rodney Bingenheimer was the driver for that.
That's right.
But I got my face in the movie.
Yeah. And you've been in a few of the videos too as well.
Oh, yeah.
You and I Want to Live, and was it Sedated?
Yeah.
And are you in psychotherapy?
No, not psychotherapy.
No, not psychotherapy.
There's another one I can't remember. A couple other ones.
So, okay, 22 years on the road with the Ramones. What tour would you say they were firing on all cylinders? They were at the top of their game. What album, what tour?
Well, I mean, the 1977 show at the Rainbow Theater during New Year's Eve was top of the line for that particular group, the Tommy, Joey, Dee Dee, and Johnny. That was the best for them. But over the years, there's other shows with different people in the group that were terrific also. But they filmed that show. It's terrific shows. I was doing the sound for that show. I was on the soundboard.
Was that the Rainbow? And was that in London?
London.
Yeah.
New Year's Eve. Great show. They captured that. It was terrific.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And so also wearing the hat of tour manager, what's the worst pickle you've ever had to fish the Ramones out of, either as a band collectively or individually? Were you ever called in the middle of the night to get someone out of jail? Or
Well, Dee Dee OD'd a few times on the road. That was pretty crappy.
Yeah, I bet that's scary. So
one time early on in LA, they didn't realize that Joey and I think Dee Dee and Arturo were walking around. You don't really walk around in LA very much. They're walking across the street. I think they jaywalked it. They stopped them and brought them down to the police station because they were looking like Joey and stuff. They didn't know what the hell was going on. So I had to get them out of the police station.
That's one of the first things I ever heard of, just from like acquaintances. The first time I went to LA and Hollywood, just walking around down there, someone goes, "Hey, make sure you don't jaywalk because there's like literally meter maids looking for that. They'll chase you down and write you up and get on the radio." And I'm like,
yeah, well, they got arrested. They took them in.
Wow, that's crazy.
So also in your book, you tell a joke in the book, and I'm going to set up the joke, and I want you to provide the punchline because I thought this was classic. Okay, here's the joke from the mouth of Monte Melnick. What's the difference between a road manager and a toilet?
Toilet bowl. Well, a toilet bowl only has to deal with one asshole at a time. You can put anything in there, tour manager, or whatever you want in the beginning.
Yeah.
That's an old joke. I told them that a few times.
I loved it. It seems so fitting because, all the years you spent with these guys, and, I don't want to paint them as completely dysfunctional, and if you were managing any four guys on the road, there's going to be issues and personalities and egos and whatever. And that's just the band. And then part of your responsibility is dealing with the promoters and all that other stuff.
The crew.
And the crew.
That doubles my crazy people around me. Or triples it.
I was going to say triples. Yeah.
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 So the crew is another.
Sometimes a lot worse. Especially if they're late, if they're driving the gear truck and they're late, or they have a flat tire, or they overslept, or what, it's you're the one who has to smooth that shit over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we go early years, we would go into Europe, and they was putting in the drum hardware like pot, stuffing it in. In those days, nobody was really. I said, don't do that, but they did it anyhow because they had it at the pot when they got there. They were like stuffing it in the hardware because at that time, early years, late 70s, 80s, nobody was really heavily watching stuff.
I guess like a cymbal stand, you can pop.
Some of the early voids.
Hollow cymbal stand.
Yeah, right.
That's
stuff
a
like
good
that.
idea.
And also, like Dee Dee would buy like switchblades. We collected them, and they say, "Here, put them in the drum hardware because we can get that back easily." They went, "Look." Early years, they didn't inspect all the little pieces and bits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What about when you're like, when the band would, writing sessions? Were you around?
No, basically they did that on their own stuff.
Okay. What about like in the recording studio? And
well, I was there basically, to make sure the crew was there, and I hang out in the green room basically. And, just watch them here and there, stuff like that.
Any Phil Spector stories?
Oh yeah, there's a few of them in my book. Yeah, sure.
Nice.
He was off the wall,
Yeah.
I mean, initially, there was, hey, wow. Well, in 1977, we played the Whiskey headline. I think Blondie opened up, and Phil Spector came out. There's a picture of him in my book. He's got a cape on and like a beard, and looks like the devil beard and stuff.
Yeah.
He had bodyguards. But he was a fan. He came back and said, I love you guys. We'll do something. Years later, 1989, finally Seymour got him to do the album. But, I mean, we respected him. We knew that he was a great producer, but we didn't know how crazy he was at the time. And he was very difficult because, the Ramones like to work fast.
Yeah.
And he liked to work very slowly, There's one
See-
chord he made Johnny play like 15, 20 times, the same chord, And he had guns on him. He put the gun on the table. He never pointed it at us.
Right.
We know he had guns. His bodyguard had guns. A few stories about him holding us hostage in his house a few times and stuff like that. It's pretty crazy.
Whoa.
I mean, they had to sit down with him because he would like have outbursts in the studio. So in the early sessions, we had to bring him to the hotel and, with the record company and sit down with him and say, "Look, Phil, you got to take it easy. What you're doing here, you're out of control." I said, "Okay, I'll calm down." It was difficult.
Yeah.
Speaking of that album, there's something in your book also that the album cover is very unique in the fact that the Ramones, the guys in the band, aren't wearing their leather jackets on the cover, and apparently Johnny was really pissed about that because he was very proud of the uniform and the cohesive look of the band. And there they are on End of the Century with different colored T-shirts and no leather jackets. And what do you remember about that? As far because it was almost like working with Phil Spector and then trying to alter the visual appearance was almost like an attempt to possibly explore a different audience.
Yeah, become popular.
Yeah,
Sell some albums.
Yeah.
Johnny and Dee Dee hated it. They didn't like it. That was a Mick Rock photo, by the way. Mick Rock.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Spencer Drake was the designer of the album there. So they did just Johnny didn't like it. Dee Dee didn't like it. Joey and Marky couldn't care less. They said fine, Yeah. And there, I think inside sleeve there has a picture of them with the same picture with them with the leather jackets on. Yeah, Johnny wanted to keep that look, but he's let's lose Phil Spector. Maybe we'll sell some albums. Let's do a little more poppy cover. We'll try it. So they tried it, and then that was the end of that, not wearing leather jackets on the covers.
Yeah. Living here in Texas, I saw the Ramones, numerous times, but one time I'll always remember is they were playing outdoors at the Aquafest, which was, an outdoor thing right on the banks of Town Lake here in the middle of downtown. And of course, it's Austin, Texas. It's hotter than Hades. And I think that's the first time I saw the Ramones perform without their leather jackets, because they came out with the jackets on, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm dying out here in the crowd, and they're on stage with this leather jacket. How long is this going to last? And I think it's the first time I ever saw them after, 3 or 4 songs slowly start to peel off the leather jackets.
No, they started doing that later on because they played a few songs, number of songs, and they take the jackets off. But Joey wouldn't take his jacket off at all.
Yeah.
And it was horrible because at the end of the show, it was like soaking wet.
Yeah.
And we'd hang it up, but it was still never dried out properly. We had, a wardrobe case. So they took off their jackets basically later on, after a number of songs, they would take their jackets off. One time, I think we were in Sweden or something in the early years, and Johnny took his jacket off and suddenly stole it right from the stage.
Oh,
he was pissed.
That's actually happened to me.
Oh yeah.
Go on stage, take my leather jacket off, hanging on a mic stand over there. There's a guitar tech standing right there.
Yeah.
All night. Oh, it'd be fine right here. Had my wallet, my keys, my keys to the bus, Hey, end of the show. Thank you. Good night. Where's my jacket? Gone. Years later, a guy called management. I want get backstage passes to the show. Why? Who are you? I have Jason's jacket.
Yeah.
I used it as ransom to get into the show.
Sounds like it.
Ridiculous.
In the early years, the Ramones, people were jumping on the stage and stuff they hated that. They didn't want anybody. They said, "This is our show. Don't do
like that
either."
either.
So I had to get.
Lemmy felt the same way about that.
Yeah. I had to make sure.
Band.
Yeah. I had to make sure we had good crash barriers and the security in front to make sure that nobody would get on stage. As Johnny said, no, nobody gets on stage. A lot of punk groups, so come on stage, jump up, stage time, blah blah blah. No, this is the Ramones show, not your show.
Yeah.
So that's after that happened, we got the good barriers and security and stuff like that.
Yeah, I like the couple things, not to go backwards, but I love the uniform idea, and I love hearing that there were members of the band that, maybe it was a little bit mixed opinions, but that there was, people who really cared about, Johnny saying, gotta have a leather jacket, it's gotta look a certain way, it's gotta
No,
feel a certain way all the fucking time, or it's not the goddamn Ramones.
no, he really studied like what was going on stage, and he was like the general, and he knew what to do and when to all the stage moves and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the Ramones really worked on their show. People don't realize. They think they just played 3 chords and that was that.
No,
they rehearsed every time they came back from a tour. They rehearsed for 2 weeks. Then go back on tour.
Yeah.
But we rehearse a lot. And in fact, before every show, they had a little practice amp and a practice drum kit. They would warm up playing like a number of songs, and Joey would go into another room and do vocal exercises. He had a vocal coach later on,
Right.
So they really worked hard.
Yeah.
Trying to stay in shape. I love hearing this, because I think that you would know above all people, how hard these guys worked at it, but someone just kind of looking in from afar, they're not even a fly on the wall. And there's, the Ramones are, they're tough guys. They don't do shit. They'll drink a slam of beer and just walk out. The Ramones don't rehearse. They're hardcore. It sounds to me like they were very professional.
Oh yeah. I mean, as I said, they worked very hard at it. I mean, in the early years, they were really horrible to watch. So they actually developed. Johnny worked on it. He said, he like Tommy and I we went to a lot of concerts in our younger years, and he did too. And he said he was studying it. He said that group does that group does that. Don't talk to the audience too much. Don't tune your guitar in between songs, stuff like that. He had it down. He really had it down.
These are things that are really big to me. I direct shows for a corporate company called the School of Rock. I'm a music instructor. And for about 10 years, Blitzkrieg Bop was one of our we picked 6 songs and we put everybody through a boot camp, and they have to learn these 6 songs. And Blitzkrieg was one of the songs for forever. I've been there 15 years. For about 10 years, Blitzkrieg was one. Anyway, those are the things we talked about. Don't tune your guitar through the amp. Imagine there's 1,000 people watching you do that shit. You think that sounds and looks cool? Fuck no. So it's just one of the many things that we try to install early on if someone wants to learn how to play rock and roll.
There you go.
Yes. One of the things I picked up in the book is obviously being a road manager, you rely on tricks of the trade and experience, and getting the band fed is always a concern. And one of the things that I've taken with me ever since I read the book back in 2004, every time I'm driving down the highway here in Texas and I pass a Cracker Barrel, I think of you. And so for people who are listening to this podcast or watching that aren't in the United States, Cracker Barrel is a chain restaurant here in America, and it might be a southern United States type of thing. I don't know.
Well, they have one here. They have one here upstate New York.
Okay.
But
So tell us the story about you and the Ramones and Cracker Barrel.
Well, when you're on the road, you really need a good place to have a decent meal, So we found out that Cracker Barrel had, reasonable price and decent food. So one day we were there, and the manager said, "You have an 8x10." I said, "Yeah." I carried a bunch of 8x10 photos with me, and they all signed it. And then they paid the bill. They treated us,
Amazing.
But I found out that every Cracker Barrel did that.
There you go.
So Johnny said, get the map of Cracker Barrels, So I had the whole map, and in the morning, if it was nearby, we'd stop there and we get the free meal. It's amazing they did that, I don't know if they do that anymore, but at that time, if you were a band and fairly known, that you give the manager the 8x10 sign, and they feed the whole table.
That's called resourceful right there. And can you imagine? Paint the picture. The Ramones walk into a Cracker Barrel.
This is the beginning of that's the beginning of Monty's next book.
Yes.
That's the first few words of Monty's next sentence.
Well,
paragraph.
Yeah. That's the intro to your next book. The Ramones walk into a Cracker Barrel.
Dot.
Well, there's that famous story that goes around about late 70s. We're driving around. Actually, I think it was Texas, some really small town in Texas.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was like 5 hours or 6 hours in the van, and we pulled in the gas station with the convenience store. So they stagger out of the van looking like, Joey and the rest of them, like after like 5 hours of stumbling around and looking. I'm paying for the gas, and the attendant comes to me and says, "Oh, it's sure nice of you taking care of those retarded boys."
Oh, shit.
I said, "Yes, ma'am, that's my job."
That's that's in the book, and I think you were at Snake Farm.
It was true.
You were at Snake Farm, weren't you?
No, it was that we'd like to go to Snake Farm.
Okay.
There was a gas stop with a convenience store.
Yeah.
Where they just staggered out, and the way they looked at that time, and nobody knew who they were. They were like, it was pretty radical for the poor attendant there,
Wow.
So, are you still close with the surviving?
Oh yeah, here and there. I talk to CJ and Richie here and there, and on and off with Marky. Not hugely closely, but we're not there with them. Have you
ever considered getting back in the game, or are you done with that?
No, at my age, it's a hard life.
Yeah.
I don't think I could get back on the road. It's very taxing. As I said, I had 20-something years doing it, and then at my age, I don't think it would be rough. It would be rough.
Yeah.
So you're, let's talk about this for a second, because we've talked about a few different sort of layers or hats that you've had to wear to have that job and do it for the Ramones of all people. I mean that respectively. Did you guys have a CPA and a lawyer and
sure.
Did you have
accountant, lawyers, everything?
Where I'm going with this is, did you have as an employee or a member, not to get too personal, but were there benefits later for?
Yeah, later. That's why I stuck around. They gave me all the benefits, health and all that stuff.
Fantastic.
And there was enough work, doing a video, doing a movie, rehearsal, and they toured so much that they needed me around a lot.
By the time that they became incorporated, so to speak, they had benefits.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's funny you're talking about them in the van and stuff. Well, after the Ramones retired in '96, I managed Marky.
Yeah.
Marky Ramone and the Intruders. George Abose, the photographer, we had a management company called Search and Rescue. So I got Marky's first 2 albums out, Marky Ramone and the Intruders, and I sent them on the road with some other guy as a tour manager, a guy named Warren Cohn. But the problem with that was that Marky was coming from the Ramones, and I said, "Look, I can't get you the same money that the Ramones are getting. I can't put you in the same hotels the Ramones are getting." So it kind of pissed them off, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I tried. I was with them for about a year and a half. We parted amicably and stuff like that. And then talk about, in the van, I did a couple of jobs with Degeneration, Jesse Malin's group.
Love Degeneration.
So being in the van with them was amazing, because they're joking around and smiling and telling jokes. And it's like a whole nother world. It's a whole nother world.
I love Degeneration.
That must have been some kind of like shock to go from just like totally quiet all the time. And,
it was great.
Healthy, but tension, and great. Then to get in with Degen and go, wow, you guys are knuckleheads and this is fun. Totally different vibe than what you're used to forever.
Yeah, Jesse's great. He's doing terrific on his solo stuff.
I'm a big fan of his solo stuff, and I've seen him numerous times and had the pleasure of meeting him a number of times. A lot of respect for Jesse Malin and Degeneration. That's a band that should have been bigger than they were.
Yes.
We've talked about them, mainly Dave, on this podcast before, about how they could have been. We did an episode on what bands could have been bigger, and they were one of the ones I think we talked about there. Or I know that we've mentioned them multiple times on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Monty, are there moments of, odd moments of peace and clarity where you catch yourself thinking, you're the last man standing? And I don't just mean the original Ramones, but like you said earlier, Arturo Vega is gone. Danny Fields,
Linda Stein.
Seymour, Linda Stein. I mean, it's not just the core original band that's gone, but a lot of the people that were also on the inner circle. And you're literally like, as far as I know, the last person from, 1974, 75, 76 that's still here. And, what is that? What goes through your head when you think about that?
That's I got to knock on wood. On my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's strange that
because there's a hell of a legacy associated with the Ramones, and you know what, and you're kind of the last guy that's around to actually see it. The guys were starting to see a little bit of it before they successively passed away, but you're the guy that's still here and is able to see what an impact they truly had, more so than anybody else that was involved in the band.
What a shame that the four originals are not here to see how big they are. I mean, now people say Beatles, Stones, Ramones, as you mentioned there before.
Yeah.
And the four originals, never got to see that how big they are now, I mean, it amazes me that they're huge now.
Yeah.
And they're in movie soundtracks and TV commercials. They couldn't get that stuff when they were around,
No,
Yeah.
I talk about that. I talk about that all the time. It's like, God, these guys are rolling. Not being able to even just go, wow, they're playing me in the grocery store, just the shit like that. It's ridiculous. They're such an institution, and that it goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it.
It's amazing that it's so huge now. I tell this joke 1,000 times. That's the same joke I tell.
I'm glad that there's so many people, and I'm so sorry to interrupt, that there's so many other bands and musicians that, like carve it right on their sleeve, like Lemmy writing the song already.
That's
that is incredible that he did that while they were still going.
Yeah.
And the fact that they were sort of interlocked there in a lot of different ways.
And he played the last show.
Yeah,
huge respect. That's respect.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll get back to the crazy joke. I mean, I tell this a lot of times. If the Ramones were this big when I was working for them, I would have gotten a big raise.
well, yeah.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
I mean,
what a
so big now. It's amazing. I mean,
yeah.
And
I love it. It's nice, but to see the originals not there, to see how much they, influenced people.
Yeah.
I think that's the legacy of the Ramones, basically, that they were kind of like the Johnny Appleseeds. Johnny Appleseed would go plant apples here and there, and the apples would grow up. They were traveling throughout the country, throughout the world, and these young kids would see them and say, hey, they can do that. It's not that hard, as long as you're competent and play decent songs. And they inspired all these groups.
Yes.
That give them credit.
Yeah.
Yes. Globally.
Everywhere. I mean,
globally.
I was going to ask you, when, let's say, I don't know, let's say 94, 95, there's this wave of pop punk and punk rock and, Green Day, The Offspring, Rancid. These bands are starting to happen, and they're selling a ton of records, and they acknowledge the Ramones. But so, as someone who was sitting right next to the Ramones watching this happen, what did you get? Did you get a certain vibe from those guys as to were they happy for these guys? Did they feel like, wait a minute, that's supposed to be us?
Yeah, I mean, they liked a lot of the groups. Green Day, actually at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Joey wasn't around. Johnny didn't want to play with anybody. So Green Day actually came up and played the Ramones songs for that induction
I saw
ceremony.
that.
Yeah.
And Eddie Vedder inducted them. He came
Yes,
out with a
that's right.
mohawk. I don't know why he wore the mohawk. That was pretty bizarre. Of Eddie Vedder, he had a
Yeah.
mohawk.
Yeah.
But all these bands, I mean, in 1996, we did a Lollapalooza tour,
Yep.
and it was headline Metallica, Soundgarden, Rancid, Ramones.
I was there.
So I get the Ramones on stage. I'm standing there. All of a sudden, looking at there's all the groups. There's the Metallica, Soundgarden. They're all inside the stage. They're fans. They love it. They got to be very good friends with the band. And they said, "Do you influenced us?" In fact, the one time in Ohio, I remember, these kids come back and say, "Hey, we're Metallica. We love you guys." You know, they're little kids. You know.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then they're now the poor Ramones are fourth on the bill, and you know,
Right.
But the other group, the bands, like said, "You guys, we love you guys. We love the Ramones. We love you guys." You know.
Yes.
I mean, the U2 writing that song, "The Miracle of Joe Ramone," holy mackerel. You know.
Yeah.
Eddie Vedder was a huge fan.
Yes.
All these groups, that was a legacy of the Ramones. They inspired all these kids to say, "Go out there, you can do it too. It's not that hard. You don't have to be a great musician and virtuoso, blah, 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 blah. Just do it." And that's their legacy.
I feel like that is the story of U2, and it's the story of the Clash, and those are also bands that claim the Ramones were the reason why.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's almost the ultimate thanks or acknowledgement. It didn't translate necessarily into money, but I mean, you want to talk about walking away with your street cred fully intact.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody that can challenge the Ramones on any level as far as their influence and
when it's
sticking
the
to their
biggest
guns.
bands in the world that are like exactly the way you just set up, Dave.
Yeah.
It's the biggest bands in the world that are giving credit to the Ramones, whether the Ramones are able to make a dime off of just you can't. It's like there's no monetary gain from that other than holy shit, you're a bad motherfucker on the street.
Yeah.
Now there's monetary gain. They're selling albums now.
Right.
As I said, the album just went gold like after 40-something years and stuff like that.
And before that, I mean, Mania was the only gold album they had for the longest time, right?
Yeah.
And that's a greatest hits compilation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, God, these guys couldn't get a break to save their lives.
The radio in the States just ignored them. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why they were big in South America. So the radio station played it, the kids loved them, and they were huge down there.
Yeah. I still have it wasn't even a DVD at the time. It was a VHS tape, and there's footage of you guys in South America, Argentina especially, and it's just like it's Beatlemania. You can't even drive the van through the crowd. They're banging on the windows. They're hanging on the roof.
That was a painful moment. Johnny's like, "Good job, Monty. Good job." Meanwhile, I had 4 security guards. We didn't know what was going on at the time. We were there, and all of a sudden, like there's hundreds of kids outside. That was a one-way street. We had to go. Couldn't go straight. I had to make a right turn in this narrow street. I had 4 security guards go out, try to clear the kids away. So I said, "Okay, let's do it." So we start driving out, make the turn, and the car blocks us. So we're stuck there, and it was scary. We never had this happen before. The kids like banging on rocking the van. And Johnny's yelling at me, "Good job, Monty." Like I had 4 security guards. They couldn't do anything when you're stuck in the street like that.
Yeah,
it was pretty crazy. And it was amazing with the crowds down there. We got kicked out of 4 different hotels, though we found a hotel with a big fence around it. We keep the kids back because initially some kids like broke some glass in some hotels. But even at night, the kids were out there like chanting, waking up the people in the hotel. It's like amazing how talk about fanatic.
Yeah, it's borderline, like zombie apocalypse. But at the same time, it also, and this just feels strange even saying this, it also equals one word: love. Love.
Yeah,
it's love, man.
Yeah,
it's true.
And so, Monty, if 1996 Monty, who was at the last show, August of '96, if 1996 Monty could go back to 1974 Monty and impart any words of wisdom about road managing the Ramones, what's the one thing you took away that was the biggest piece of advice the older you would give the younger you?
Oh, my God. That's a rough question.
Way to go, Dave.
Stay away from toilet bowls.
Ooh. Full circle.
Yeah.
That's a hard question. I wouldn't really know. I mean,
Well,
it's such a journey, over 20 years, just learning the stuff and building it up. So it's like, there was nothing really I could tell my younger guy, really.
Yeah, I only asked because I figured after 22 years in the business, you learned some tricks of the trade that you weren't quite, clued into.
In the beginning, it was like rough. I mean, I didn't have there was no cell phones and no computers. I had to go to AAA and get maps.
Yeah.
And Xerox them, So it was a different world, basically, to 96 to 74.
Payphones.
Yeah, no, it was like raw. I thought with the spreadsheets, and record stuff on spreadsheets. Now, computers weren't around, so it was. That was what it was. I dealt with it.
Yeah. What's the one time that you guys were out that you were treated like the gods you deserve to be treated like?
South America, basically.
Yeah. So the final.
But they didn't like that, though. I mean, they couldn't. Johnny liked to walk around and go outside, and you couldn't do that. You couldn't go to any restaurants. You had to clear the restaurant out. In and out of airports, we had to go through the back.
Yeah.
It was like interesting. I mean, they got a taste of what it was like to be supergroup.
Right.
And Johnny said, "No, I don't like this. I want to go out there and walk around and do my own thing." But they couldn't. So that's the payment you had to do to be a supergroup. Me, I was fine with that. I could go out and do what I wanted.
So when they would go back, like say, you go, like 6 months, a year later, you go back to South America, was there's eye rolling and here we go, we're going to sit back door and clear the restaurant.
Yes, the same thing.
Security.
It got bigger and bigger.
Yeah, at least they had they'd already been through it a couple of times. They knew what to expect.
Yeah, I mean, end up playing the stadium there and stuff like that, and working from clubs up,
Crazy.
And they were fanatical, amazing.
I want to ask you one last thing, and if Jason has something else, we'll let him chime in after me. But one of the things that I always thought was interesting, and I think a lot of Ramones fans find this interesting, is that the last gig was played in Los Angeles, and the Ramones are the epitome of a New York band. And they formed in New York. They rose through the ranks in New York. They were quintessential New Yorkers, and they played their last gig in L.A. And Johnny and Dee Dee are buried in L.A. if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And so how does that happen?
Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Dee Dee's buried there, and Johnny has a statue there.
Yeah.
He's actually, ashes are up in his house there. Well, 96, they ended all. Johnny had moved out to LA a few years before the last tour, and 96, the last Lollapalooza show was out there. So Johnny said, "Well, let's just do the show here." We originally did some Coney Island shows before that, figuring that was the last shows, but then we got the Lollapalooza tour, which happened to end in LA. So that's how that happened.
I would have thought, that, maybe they would have made an attempt to take their final bow, if you will, on their home turf,
I mean, as I said initially, they figured the Coney Island shows a week there as a small club, would do that. But then the Lollapalooza show, Johnny said, "This is good enough. We'll film the show and have all these special guests there." And Lemmy was there. Actually, Dee Dee came out, sang a song, forgot the lyrics and stuff.
Nice.
I saw he came out and did "Love Kills," right?
Yeah, I forgot the lyrics.
Yeah, forgot the lyrics.
And then all the people from the Lollapalooza tour came out and did little shticks there. Lemmy, of course, came out and sang the song. Yes, it was terrific. Yeah. It was a sad thing, The end.
Emotional.
Yeah, very much so. I imagine for you, knowing this is the end of the road, and after so many years and so many memories, and you had to have a little bit of a tear in your eye, I would guess.
Yeah, it's emotional. Still something. I mean, it didn't hit me until a few days afterwards what was going on. Because a lot of times they would say, this is the last show, this is the last show.
Yeah.
And it never happened. So
Right.
this finally happened. And it started when Johnny started giving away his equipment, you know.
Yeah. Well, you drove the bus literally and figuratively for 2,200 and some odd shows. And I'm here to say thank you, sir, because I'm a huge
Thank
Ramones
you for your
fan.
service.
Yes, I am a huge Ramones fan, and I know I'm not alone. And Monty, you know I'm not alone. The world is filled with Ramones fans, and I understand that it takes more than just the four guys on stage to make it happen. And you are a trooper. 22 years in the trenches with one of the greatest bands of all time, and so thank you, as Jason said, for your service. Thank you for being on our podcast. This is a real honor for me, especially, and I think I can speak for Jason as well.
Yes, sir.
Well, you know, also, I mean, in my book, I try to, people go to a show and they see the band on stage. Well, they don't see anything else. But actually, underneath the band, there's the crew, other people there. You have to have a good guitar roadie, a good drum roadie, a good monitor man, a good sound man, a good light man. They're all the people that involved in the show, not just the band, because the band's very important. But in my book, I try to bring out other people, that the foundation underneath the group.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things.
And you do. I do love the fact that your book is quoting, you know, road crew and drum techs and, you know, people that aren't as visible as the band itself. So, yeah. And again, people can get
on the road with the Ramones.
On the road with the Ramones.
Get the one with the red Ramones on it.
There you go.
Bonus edition.
Bonus edition.
Amazon.com.
40 new pages of stuff you haven't read yet. So, yeah. Monty, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. This has been amazing. I've, like I said, I've interviewed various members of the Ramones over the years. Ida Langsam has been so gracious to me over the years, setting me up with interviews, and it's great to pick your brain because you were right there in the middle of it all. And
thank you.
Yeah, very unique perspective. So thank you for that.
Okay.
I think we're going to sign off for now. I'm Metal Dave, along with my co-host Jason McMaster, and special thanks to Monty Melnick, ladies and gentlemen.
Gabba gabba hey.
For joining us. Gabba gabba hey indeed.
Gabba gabba motherfucking hey.
Thank you all for listening to the Talk Louder podcast. We will catch you next time on the next episode.